What's happening, fam? L.A.R movement still moving. Subscribe or die trying. You see the thumbnail. Let's talk about crime in the middle class. So there's another mass shooting. 19-year-old young man in Indianapolis killed 8 people. I think 4 of them was Muslim at a FedEx place. And I saw something last week about this in the previous week. Michael Jai White on DJ Vlad again. And he was saying how he was talking to these white supremacists and they were talking about crime and race. And the guy was like, the black on black crime argument. And he's like, well, where all this black on black crime exists, is it poor? He's like, yeah. So can you find the same rate of crimes in white neighborhoods that are equally as poor? Like, yes. And so do you find this same crime rate in the middle class with black people? Like, no. So it's not black people are inherently violent. It's poverty across all lines creates a high crime rate. And he said the guy was kind of like stunned, right? But this goes into another thing. People don't want to talk about the people in the middle class and the upper class who are criminals, who are non-black. And what I mean by that is, they had an interview with this young man's family, and they were talking about the dad died like 17 years ago, or something like that, 15 years ago, something like that. And he's had issues ever since, which to me didn't make sense, but to some people it might. But to say that that's festering in you for so many years that you go to your job or your former job and shoot 8 people doesn't make sense. But what people don't want to talk about is what's going on with the crime in the middle class, because there's a lot of drug dealing in the middle class. There's a lot of not as many murders, but a lot of home invasions, a lot of break-ins, a lot of theft, a lot of robberies, a lot of I don't know if you're gonna call car thefts. Uh, there are a lot of people who steal from the government or their customers if they're business owners. Price gouging. And nobody asked the question, well, if these people in the middle class and even in the upper class and they're acting like criminals, well, where's the inherent, maybe these people are just criminals argument with these folks? Because people are trying to figure out, like, why are we having all these mass shootings, say in the last month, when ultimately we've been locked down for a year. So what's got people so mad that they're going on mass shootings? Because these are people who are not involved, who you would not consider criminals. You wouldn't consider people violent offenders. People just losing and snapping and just shooting up a bunch of people for what you come to find out is a frivolous reason. And one of the things I think about crime in the middle class is people don't want to admit that a lot of times these people are just soft and sheltered, and they're very fragile, so mentally, so they just blow up. And then you got the same issue where you got a lot of families who are middle class and upper class, and their kids are accustomed to their parents' lifestyle, and that doesn't mean that they have the same work ethic to keep it up, so they become criminals. Because they don't want to work as hard as their parents, but they want to reap the benefits. Then they become adults, and then they become little scam artists and this, that, and the third. Because when you think about scammers and hackers and this, that, and the third, you really think about, pretty much, you would say white people and probably Asians, right? And I remember doing a video on a guy who was a hacker, and he basically is a hacker for companies, like for banks and whatnot. And he'll walk into the banks and basically hack people's banks and then walk out. And one of the biggest covers is that he's a white guy. And then you have all of these things that can be done, the street racing, the how can I say this? These parties, those prescription parties that they used to have, all these swingers parties that they have. So you have all of these drugs, betting, gambling, racing, sex parties, sex prostitution. You got, you know, guys in the in sex trafficking, but they're in the middle class, so you don't really pay attention to it. So what's interesting, when people think about drug dealers, usually your plugs are in middle class neighborhoods and upper middle class and upper class neighborhoods. They can live that life, but nobody wants to talk about these suburban criminals, suburban gangsters, right? Because nobody wants to say how much they can get away with. They had an old FBI agent that is still on YouTube talking about how they were breaking into, they were really busting up the crime in the streets. And the guy was like, he was a black guy. He said, nah, I mean, why are we going to these other places that have, where it's not predominantly black? And he was like, well, because those people, their families have lawyers, and then they know judges, and they know police chiefs, and they have connections, and they know newscasters, this, that, and the third type of excuse to why if we go out over there, we're gonna have to deal with a storm of backlash from arresting these people and messing up their good profitable lives. And it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Suburban criminals. That was the thing about the emission scandal. Those are suburban criminals. You know what I'm saying? But you change the color, nobody knows the wiser. And I'm like, okay, we're gonna have problems. But that's my thoughts. Because, when I was talking about you know, the pandemic and having shootouts and the guy having mental issues and then buying a gun and getting the gun taken away from him and then going buying another gun and then shooting up the place. That wouldn't have happened if that young man was black. It just wouldn't have happened. But now I'm done. Like, share, subscribe, or die trying. Peace.